Quick Hits.
Welcome to another edition of Hobby Quick Hits, the shorter, younger brother of Sports Card Nation, where we tackle one topic in depth, get in, get out, and shorter version of our big show. Today, I'm going to talk about vintage baseball specifically. Vintage baseball. Why? Because it's something I've really pivoted to and recently really gotten into heavy again, probably in the last 3 or 4 months. How come? A few reasons. Number one, I really do enjoy it. I kind of got away from it. I was really into it back in my store days, had quite an inventory, and then sold a lot in my store during my store days. Still had some, but not nearly what I once did. And I always kind of missed it. I always, wanted to get into it again, but sort of got into the modern day stuff because it sells well, and had vintage in my sort of rearview mirror, but never really, jump back in again. And what really made me focus back on it is kind of what we're seeing in the hobby today. Is we're seeing these ultra modern cards go for crazy money. We're seeing the wax boxes go for 4 to 8 times retail once it goes live, making opening very difficult. And I still buy singles. I do open wax when I can, not as much as I used to, and that's done on purpose. But, vintage, while we've seen even that market really skyrocket too, we've seen, your bigger names, your Mantles, your Ted Williams, Willie Mays, those sort of guys bring some record-setting numbers in their own right. Hank Aaron's, Jackie Robinson's. There's still some other players from the vintage era. There's still great opportunity there to get some diamonds in the rough. And I know that's weird saying diamonds in the rough when you're talking about Hall of Fame players. These guys are in the Hall of Fame, but they're just, don't bring the same amount of money as some of those bigger names I just mentioned. But when you look at their numbers, I can make a case that they're undervalued. Who are some of those guys that might fit that description, that are still great buys, and you can get some great deals? I got quite a list here. Ernie Banks is a great Hall of Famer, Chicago Cub legend, but for some reason his cards, don't seem to bring nearly what they should. Carl Yastrzemski from the Red Sox, sort of playing in the shadow of Ted Williams, but obvious Hall of Famer in his own right. A lot of the pitchers from that era dominating in their own right, but not getting a ton of hobby love, or not as much as they should. Steve Carlton, very affordable. One of the greatest lefties to ever play the game. Tom Seaver, right? Bob Gibson, for as dominating as he was, he's, very undervalued. Another one of my favorite vintage players, Stan Musial, one of the greatest hitters ever to pick up a bat. Duke Snider, if you're a fan of my dad, Brooklyn Dodgers. Yogi Berra for being a Yankee and winning all those rings. His stuff's not crazy money, but one of the greatest catchers ever to put the glove on. Harmon Killebrew, one of my favorite players when I was a young kid, even growing up in New York City, just liked the way to play the game. I mean, his rookies can still be had fairly cheap. You go back a little further, right? You want to go back even a little further. Jimmy Fox, Hank Greenberg, they were overshadowed during the Ruth and Gehrig days, and so while they're have similar resumes, they're not on par value-wise with your Ruth and Gehrigs. But Jimmy Fox and Hank Greenberg, right? If you go to more current, they're retired in their Hall of Famers, but they're more newer, if you will. These guys are I still believe, are undervalued. The Hawk, Andre Dawson, Great player defensively and offensively. Greg Maddux, arguably one of the greatest pitchers ever to take the bump. You look at his stuff. I mean, his rookie cards going for $5-10 for. He's arguably, you ask some people if you can only have one guy on the mound, in a must-win game. He's a lot of people's answers. I mean, he was a dominating pitcher. He was a dominating pitcher in the 90s. I mean, just incredible. His stuff still undervalued. And another guy, believe it or not, great player. He also played in the steroid period, but never mentioned in that group, and put up numbers, that are tremendous. Ken Griffey Jr., and I've been buying a lot of his obscure inserts and parallels, and still can be had at, frankly, prices they shouldn't be going for. They should be going for more. I'm not complaining because I've gotten some great cards at great price levels, but to me, it's he should be going for a lot more. So there's a great opportunity to pick up some great deals on if you want to go back to the Ruth Gehrig days, there's some undervalued there. If you want to go back to the what I would call the straight vintage days, Mantle, Mays, Aaron, there's some great deals there. And then as you go into the 60s, 70s, and even the 80s, with your Dawsons and Griffeys and Maddoxes, you got a lot of potential to pick up what I would call steals and deals. And so that begs the next question, right? Well, where do you get them, right? Well, obviously you got all your major selling platforms, right? We don't have to go into those, your eBays and your other selling platforms. But I think you got to think sometimes a little outside the box, especially when it comes to vintage. Facebook Marketplace is a great sometimes place to find a steal of a deal occasionally. Especially in that 80s, 70s, and 80s bracket, if you will. Port sales on ComC. A lot of people just selling their whole, selection of a certain era. It's a great way. I bought this kind of stuff on eBay lots. I bought like vintage star lots on eBay. And sure, there's some garbagey stuff or not some premium stuff in there. But there's also, if you get the right deal, there's some decent stuff you can pull out of there as well. Advertise yourself, right? Another thing you can do is advertise, put a little ad in the swap sheet or the classifieds, right? Buying vintage sports cards. Now, I'm going to warn you, you do that, something I've done in the past, you're going to get some crazy calls, with people telling you how great their 91 Fleer collection is and it's vintage, right? And with all due respect to 91 Fleer, right, that's not what you're ideally going to be looking for. So you have to be friendly and let them down as gently as you can. Flea markets, another great resource, folks. Go into flea markets, antique swap meets, right? Even places you may not think, well, it's not a card show, I want to go to a card show where it's all tables of cards. Well, when you go to a card show, you're going to pay card show prices. But if you find cards in the wild in non-card show settings, I've done it myself, folks. I'm talking from experience. It's a great way to get some steals and deals. With all due respect, some of these dealers, it's not their forte, right? They're dealing with maybe furniture or, pawn shop materials, old guns, weaponry, TVs, VCRs, electronics, and someone just includes some cards in the deal, or they're just like, hey, I'm trying to get rid of these, give me $5, right? And a lot of times, if that person's not a card guy, in air quotes here, they don't know really what to price at, so they just price it what they think. Sometimes that can be astronomical. I've seen, a Brett Butler marked for $100, and I've seen, Hank Aaron marked for 15. So it works both ways, right? But sometimes you can find that deal on some of that vintage in those flea market, antique, swap meet type settings. Never, even going to garage sales in your neighborhood or another local neighborhood, maybe in your city or a couple, even a town or two over. You never know what you might find, right? We see Gary Vee, does video recordings of doing that. He doesn't have to do it. It's just that thrill of the chase, the thrill of the hunt. And there's something to be said about that too, right? When you find a deal like that, you're proud of yourself. Like, man, I found that before someone else did. And you pat yourself on the back. Hey, that's cool. That's half the fun. So don't sleep on vintage. Don't think that the ship has sailed. It hasn't. There are some great deals. I can tell you even the last month I've gotten some really, really cool deals. And another item that I've been buying, I'm going to do actually a whole episode on Hobby Quick Hits about it, is the exhibit cards from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Exhibit cards are a little bit bigger by the exhibit company. Nothing on the backs, no writing, no stats. A lot of fakes out there. Got to be careful with these, but they're a lot of them are very affordable. If you get some good condition ones, they also can be gradable. So look into exhibits as a good way and an affordable way to add some great names of the past to your collection, and that's fun. I've been doing this almost 40 years, and I think I enjoy. I got a confession, if you want to call it that. I think I enjoy buying vintage. Now, I love all cards, but there's something to be said. I think I enjoy buying vintage more because I think it's a little trickier. I think it's harder to find. It's harder to find at a decent price. It's less prevalent. A lot of, you got to weed through a lot of weeds to get to the good plants, you know what I mean? And so there's something to be said. I really do enjoy it, I think, when I really think about it, even more so than the modern stuff that I do. And I do a lot of modern stuff too. I'm not, besmirching that. I'm just saying the vintage stuff seems to bring me more joy. It's why I'm starting to head that direction. I'm going to be going to the Dallas show here in May, and one of my goals, besides meeting all my friends at a hobby and hanging out with them, which is fun in itself, but one of my goals with going around to that show is really to focus on vintage and looking at vintage stuff and buying that stuff, going through boxes where the cards are not even out necessarily in the showcase, and maybe finding some diamonds in the rough that way. I can tell you from someone who sells at shows, I put out those $1 and $2 and $5 boxes, and when I don't get to it for a while and people hand me a $5 card that now is like red hot and the card's $30, $40, $50, right? And I honor my price. That's, hey, good catch by you. If you caught, it's in there, it's priced, you're paying for it, it's yours, right? And a lot of people gotten good deals even on me, and so I like to look through those boxes and find some of that stuff. And you can still find that even in the vintage market as well. So it's kind of where I've pivoted to and really have shifted my focus there too, and you can too. It's not, I hear other people say, the vintage market skyrocketed too much, you missed the bus. You didn't miss the bus. The bus is coming back around, making its daily rounds. So get on the bus, check out vintage. It's a great opportunity, and it can be a lot of fun if you have fun with it. So with that being said, we're going to wrap up this episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Hobby Quick Hits. We're going to play our national ad, followed by our social media handles, but we'll see you very soon.
I do wish we could chat longer, but I'm having an old friend for dinner. Bye.